Hello and welcome to the first annual Pink vs. Cyan First Tech Challenge Scrimmage. My name is Patrick Michaud and I am the Program Delivery Partner for FTC in North Texas. This year's Scrimmage will be played using the Ultimate Goal Challenge presented by Qualcomm. The Scrimmage is an excellent opportunity for all of us to see many of the team robots in action and to get better preparation for the season's upcoming events. I would like to particularly thank Mr. Lon Cherryholmes for organizing this event, and also to thank the many judge and technical volunteers who are helping to make this possible. We'd also like to recognize Collins Aerospace as this season's regional program sponsor for First Tech Challenge. I hope you all have fun with the Scrimmage. We're very eager to see what your robots can do, and we look forward to presenting the results and awards later in the week. Good luck and have lots of fun.
This year's game is played on a 12-foot square field with 2 tower goals, 2 Alliance-specific power shot targets, 5-inch flexible rings, and Alliance-specific wobble goals. A match lasts for 2.5 minutes. During the 30-second autonomous period, robots can score points by moving wobble goals into an appropriate target zone, indicated by a randomly chosen number of rings stacked at the start of the match. Robots can also score autonomous points by parking on the launch line, scoring rings into tower goals, or hitting power shot targets. Robots are required to be completely in the launch zone to launch rings into the mid-goal, high goal, or power shot targets. During the 2-minute driver-controlled period, robots can collect rings and score them in the tower goals. The last 30 seconds of the driver-controlled period is the endgame. Robots can continue to score in the tower goals, but can also earn bonus points by hitting power shot targets, delivering wobble goals to starting lines or the drop zone outside of the field, and placing rings on wobble goals. This has been a quick overview of the Ultimate Goal game. For more details, see the official game manuals, and always remember our important rule, gracious professionalism.
Welcome to the Pink vs. Cyan North Texas Remote Scrimmage for First Tech Challenge. Teams will submit 6 official matches at the following URL, but this must be done in the time frame shown below, which is called the match window. As the week progresses, please upload videos of your matches to YouTube using hashtag PVC2021. If you don't have access to YouTube, submit it to us using our website. Teams will be ranked based on the ranking points, which is the sum total score of their 6 matches. Ties will be broken first by autonomous tiebreaker points, secondly by in-game tiebreaker points. At PVC, you can gain brownie points by submitting photos, your control award, a portfolio submission, or submitting a 5-minute or less video of your judging presentation. Other ways of getting brownie points is showing PVC spirit inside of your videos. As well, the first 5 teams to submit a video will get the early bird special. And find someone to game announce your robot's performance during the video, just to make it fun. At PVC, there are unions of pink teams, cyan teams, and violet teams. What these colors mean are in the eye of the beholder. But at the end of the tournament, one of these colors will be determined reigneth supreme. This will be done with the formula, where we will add up the ranking points, tiebreaker points, and all of the brownie points and divide by the number of teams in the union.
Hi, Mark Edelman, Chief Head Referee for First Tech Challenge. Here on my remote field, I want to spend a few minutes talking about remote field scoring and setup for all of you who've been sort of convinced to be field personnel for the season. First off, thank you. We appreciate everybody's help in trying to make this season work as the best we can. Before we get started on the details, I wanted to talk a little bit about a handful of just general resources. First off, take the time to watch the game animation. It's a great way to get a familiarity with the flow of gameplay, right? If you're not familiar with the game, it's a great place to start. Recognize that it does not represent the complete suite of the rules. For that, you really need to talk about spending some time reading through part 2 of the game manual. And because we're talking about remote events, you want to make sure that it's game manual part 2 remote events, right? It's been tailored specifically to address this style of gameplay for this season. There's a great resource, our FTC Q&A forum, that also is a place where teams go to ask questions and get official answers. So you want to make sure that you're keeping up to date with that. That'll help solidify your understanding of the gameplay and the rules. We'd strongly recommend spending some time looking through the scoring system videos that have been created. They're a great resource, and they'll help you understand a lot about how the scoring system works and how to use it to be able to operate matches. And then I would really recommend for all the teams and the field personnel is practice, right? So spend a lot of time working with understanding how the whole match flow works, all the way from field reset, all the way through finishing the match and scoring it. Practice that a bunch of times before it comes time to really do it for real. Okay, so my field here is set up in what I would call a reset configuration, right? There's a couple of important pieces. I have my power shots flipped to the forward state. That's how they should begin. I have 4 rings here in my starter stack on my starter stack location. I have 2 wobble goals, 1 each at the end of the 2 start lines. And I have 3 rings waiting ready for preload, right? So this is sort of how we like to think about reset. In a traditional match, there'd be 3 more rings for the second robot on the Red Alliance, but because this is a remote match, there's only 3 needed. The other 3 I've already placed into the tower goal, right? Any ring that's not preloaded goes into the tower goal. So team brings the robot out, gets it set up in a position, and I'm going to pretend that this particular robot can only handle 2 rings, so the remaining ring is going to get placed into the tower goal. The robot preloads its 1 wobble goal. Okay, we got our robot all set up. The remaining wobble goal stays at the end of the start line, just like it was when it was set up. Okay. Take a look around. Looks like our match is ready for play. I'm going to check with my team because I need to make sure that they understand it's now hands off. No touching the controls, no touching the robot, no touching any part of the field. This is the time frame where we now do our randomization, right? So in my case, I'm going to assume I got a 1, and so that means that the starter stack size should be 0, and the remaining 4 rings should now all go into my tower goal, just like any of the ones that weren't preloaded. Okay, so at this point, we're ready to begin match play. We start the scoring system or start our timer. After our 3, 2, 1, go, and the match begins. Okay, so during the autonomous period, you're watching for a couple of key scoring activities. First is delivery of the wobble goals, right? So the robot is preloaded with 1, and it's looking to try to deliver. In our case, with the randomization of 1, that means target zone A. We're looking for the wobble goal to be delivered to that target zone. In order for the wobble goal to count as scored, it needs to be completely inside the zone. And that means that no part of it is outside. And so what we're looking at is the outside edge of the tape. Is the wobble goal completely inside the volume created by extending that tape line upwards? Now, it is okay for the robot in a remote match to deliver both wobble goals, right? So it could deliver both. Next up, we're paying attention to the rings. Our robot may take advantage of being able to try to shoot rings towards launch rings towards our power shot targets. It may take advantage of the opportunity to try to score into the tower goal, right? Both of those are expected activities. Last thing the robot's likely to try to do is to park, right? So there's a navigation task that requires the robot to be in the launch line, right? So the launch line is our white line that sort of mostly divides the field in half. And in, again, just means that some part of the robot needs to be within the volume created by extending the sides of the line upwards infinitely. Okay, autonomous period's over. We're looking around. We want to make sure we've counted all the rings. We're going to record that. We want to make sure we've paid attention to the status of the wobble goals. We need to record that. Wobble goals and power shot targets. We want to make sure we capture that because they have better value during the autonomous period. Okay, autonomous period's all done. We're scored. We're good. The game is transitioning. Match is transitioning into our next period, the driver control period. Okay, at this point, our human players should become active. They need to return any rings that are in the human player station, in any of the troughs on the backside of the tower goal, to the field. They need to do that as quickly as is practical. Right? So there should be a steady flow of rings coming back anytime there's any rings in that area. Sometime during this part of the match, the human player should also reset our power shot targets. Right? There's a reset bar that makes it handy and easy to do all of them at once, but that needs to be done after the driver control period begins and before 10 seconds of the end game portion has elapsed. Right? So there's a window of time that needs to be done. And it needs to be done exactly once. Right? So they do not need to do this over and over again, just once. If by chance during the driver control period, one or more of these do get knocked back, it is okay for the human player to reset them, but there's no point in doing it up until right before the end game period begins. Right? That's the only time that we really care about during the driver control period. The only point we really care about the power shot targets is what's their status right before end game. As field personnel, you want to start to watch for one of the more common penalties in this period, which is the ring possession limit. Right, so we're looking at robots are allowed to possess no more than 3 rings. For every ring beyond that, they get 1 minor penalty, and for every 5 seconds that continues, there's an additional minor penalty per ring. So in other words, 5 rings, 2 minor penalties. 5 rings held for 5 seconds, 2 minor penalties plus 2 more minor penalties. Okay, now we're getting ready for endgame. Right before endgame, it's really important to take a look around and understand a few things. First, where are the wobble goals? Are they in an eligible place? Right? In order to be able to be scored at the end of the match for the drop zone achievement, the wobble goals need to either be not in the launch zone, in other words, not in that front portion of the field, or in a target zone. Right? So at this point, both of these wobble goals are eligible. Now this one you might say, well, it's in the launch zone, but it's an or. So as long as it's in a target zone or not in the launch zone, it's eligible. Right? At this point, they're still both eligible. Other thing we want to look at is, are there any rings on the wobble goals? Right? Rings are only eligible for endgame scoring on wobble goals if they were put on the wobble goal during the endgame. So we want to make sure we understand what's the status of the rings on the wobble goals, where are the wobble goals, and what's the status of our power shot targets. Okay, things are getting exciting. We're down in the last 30 seconds. The robot is achieving everything it can. It gets our wobble goals out. Okay, match is over. Right? So now we're looking for assessing a handful of things. We want to take a look at our power shot targets and count the number that are in the scored state, that's the back state. We want to record the number of rings we saw go into each of the goals on our tower goal. We want to look at the wobble goals, how many were delivered into the drop zone. We want to count the number of rings on each of those wobble goals. And then there's one more possible place that our wobble goal could have been delivered during endgame, which is back to the start line. Remember that in order to be eligible to be scored, wobble goals and rings need to not be currently touched by a robot of the same color, right? So if my red robot is still touching the wobble goal here, that would not count as scored. Okay, great job, match is done. Let's talk a little bit about some of the penalties you're likely to see during the match. Ring possession limit, we talked about it, no more than 3, and additional for each ring beyond 3, and again, additional for every 5 seconds that's maintained. Launch line violation, right? In order for a robot to be allowed to launch a ring, it needs to be in the launch zone. So that means no part of it can be outside the launch zone, right? And so looking for meaningful extension, right? So if it's just a wire, we probably don't care. But if there's a wheel, a mechanism, something that's significant going into the outside the launch zone, that should be a penalty. Launching out of the sides of the field. Out of the back, That's okay. We expect robots to shoot that direction. Out of the sides or out of the front, those are not okay. Okay? Illegal power shot scoring, right? In order for a power shot target to count as scored, it needs to have been moved from the front unscored state to the back scored state by direct contact with a ring. Any other method generates a major penalty. We're still going to count that power shot target as scored, but the major penalty will offset the value. With that, you've gotten a quick, easy introduction to some of the knowledge you need in order to be able to be a good scoring resource for matches and to be able to help with the field reset. Good luck. If you do have questions later, take advantage of the FTC forum. It's a great resource for finding out more information, more details, and getting clarifications. With that, good luck. We hope to see everybody as soon as is reasonable.